Welcome to the Anti-Optimist Therapist podcast, where optimism and realism coexist. I'm April O'Neill, a therapist and relentless question asker about what it actually means to live well. Here, we don't do toxic positivity or one-size-fits-all advice. We look at the real human condition, the suffering, the striving, and the quiet resilience it takes to build a meaningful life. In every episode, I'll share stories, insights, and lessons drawn from acceptance and commitment therapy, psychology, philosophy, and my own life. Because meaning isn't found in chasing perfection. It's found in learning how to carry the hard things, how to let go of control, and how to live by your values even when life doesn't cooperate. If you're tired of shallow advice and you're looking for something more honest, more human, and more useful, then you're in the right place. Today's core idea is about how you're not just living a story, but you're authoring one. In the book A Liberated Mind, Stephen Hayes says, language can shape identity. Use it to build the life you want to step into. In ACT Questions and Answers, Russ Harris says, ACT doesn't tell you how to ignore your past. It invites you to carry it differently. Your story isn't erased by trauma, but it isn't defined by it either. You get to ask, what kind of person do I want to become now? So, an interesting story that I was inspired by with this episode was something that you could think of as the wind that some might say changed the world. In 1776, during the Battle of Long Island, George Washington's army was cornered. Crushed, outnumbered, they were trapped. All the British had to do was sail a little bit up the East River, and it all would have been over. But they didn't, because the wind wasn't blowing in the right direction, so the British ships couldn't sail that way. And George Washington's army escaped under the cover of night, fog, and rain. And of this, historian David McCullough said, if the wind had been in the other direction, I think it would have been over. And someone said to him, no United States of America? And he said, I don't think so. And they said, just because of the wind, history was changed? And he said, absolutely. It wasn't strategy, it wasn't strength, it was wind. That's how unpredictable life is, and that's how fragile history can be. And the same is true for personal history. There are things that happen not because we made a mistake, but because something shifted outside of our control. And yet, afterward, we're left trying to make sense of it. For example, I didn't choose to be assaulted at a point in my life. I didn't miss the signs, but afterward, people make you feel like you should have known. You should have predicted that that would happen somehow, as if trauma were something that you could have predicted. And that's one of the most devastating parts of surviving something like that. Not just what happened, but what happens next. The self-blame, the silence, the days you stare at the wall trying to make sense of something that can't be made sense of. The strange decisions you make because in the fog of everything, trauma distorts everything. You end up stopping trusting yourself. You stop trusting your story. But here's what I learned through this. You don't have to make it make sense. You just have to keep writing anyway. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's very important to work on. And there's this old story that speaks to me. I don't know exactly where it comes from, actually. You know, it's kind of a old tale of some sort. But it's about this water bearer who carried two pots, you know, on a wood thing, I would assume, across their shoulders with two pots on either side. And so there is the perfect pot on one side that delivered a full pot of water every day. In the cracked pot, it only delivered about half the water after the water carrier got back with it. And ashamed, the crackpot apologized and said, because of my flaw, you don't get full value for your effort. But the water bearer replied, did you notice the flowers along your side of the path? That's because I planted seeds there, and every day you watered them. What the pot thought was a flaw was actually part of the beauty, not in spite of the crack, but because of it. And this reminds me of something else that I love and talk about frequently, kintsugi. It's something in Japanese art where it's broken pottery that's not thrown away. It's repaired with gold. The cracks are filled, not hidden. The fractures in it are honored, not erased. In kintsugi, which means golden joinery, and it makes the bowl more valuable after being broken. And I kind of think of ACT as being a psychological type of kintsugi, not gluing you back to who you were exactly, but helping you become something deeper, stronger, and more honest. Not perfect, not shiny, but true to you. One of my favorite nonfiction authors is Morgan Housel, and in his second book, Same as Ever, he wrote about how the most important events in life are often ones that we can't predict. He really talks about this in, the context of history in a lot of ways and big world events and stuff like that. But he shares some stories from his own life as well. And with that in mind, trauma never shows up on your calendar. Nobody warns you when your story is about to be split wide open. But when it does, you still have a choice. Not about what happened, not about how others see you, but about what you choose to stand for now. Because values are the gold you pour into the cracks that you have. They don't erase the pain, but they do help you carry it with meaning. So something that I want you to try is asking yourself, what part of my story feels cracked? And what flowers might have bloomed along that side of the path? What value could I pour into the broken places? Not to hide them, but to honor them and be better from them. And take one small step, one golden thread, one honest sentence. That's what real authorship looks like. You didn't choose the cracks that you have. You didn't predict the storm. You didn't draw this chapter on purpose, but you're still here. And you're holding the pen. Not because you're over it, not because you're fully healed, but because you're brave enough to continue. In the way you fill your cracks with values, the way you keep walking your side of the path, the way you choose authorship again and again, that's true beauty. That's strength. This next chapter that you have doesn't have to be flawless. It just has to be yours. Thanks for listening to the Anti-Optimist Therapist podcast, where optimism and realism coexist. If today's episode spoke to you, share it with someone who might need it, or leave a review so more people can find their way here. And if you want to go deeper, you can find me on Instagram, YouTube, Substack, and my website, theantioptimisttherapist.com. Remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to keep moving in the direction of what matters. I'll see you next time.